Hello and welcome to the Peak Endurance Coach. No, just the Peak Endurance podcast. God,
Podcast.
it's smooth as ever, isn't it? We're so good. I'm Isabel Tate, your host. With me, I have
Ron Tate, your
my
host.
the other host, and we actually are doing an interview. We
Yes.
did pre-warn you last
Yep.
week that we have Aaron Crook with us, who has just come back from doing the 6633 Arctic Ultra. Welcome, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to join you guys.
Yes, indeed. Very exciting. The 6633 Ultra. Aside from its weird name, we're going to get into a lot of different things about what you got up to over there. But firstly, um, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into running, because this Arctic Ultra, which he won, by the way, so congratulations, is actually really long, 380 miles. And obviously you didn't start running that. You must have started running somewhere. So did you want to just tell us a little bit about your running journey?
Yeah, sure. I kind of fell into running a little bit, to be honest. I played volleyball at a high level for most of my teens, and then beach volleyball. I represented Australia.
Oh, wow.
Played on the national tour, and then through Asia and some Europe as well. And then as I got older and my responsibilities, my family responsibilities grew. I had less time to train, and I felt like my progression had kind of halted. And for me, I didn't like the idea of slowly just getting worse and trying to compete. So I thought that a shift was really necessary for me, and the the thing that so I essentially just went out looking for what would be a new challenge, something that I could really work at and see if I could improve at and become decent. And um, running had always been a challenge for me in training. I'd never really enjoyed it.
So
So I
you had
thought,
to do
well,
run training for volleyball?
yeah. So there was always a cardio component. A lot of it was
Yeah, I
like
guess.
beep tests and things like
Yeah.
that, sprints, nothing endurance related whatsoever. Yeah, so I just went looking on the internet for something like a challenge that I could set myself and then work towards. I like the idea of giving myself like a period of time to see if I could achieve something. So I went looking, and the Marathon des Sables seemed to be the biggest challenge that I could sign up for. That wouldn't
Seriously, so the
require.
first race you signed up for was Marathon des Sables
Yeah.
because volleyball took up too much time. So you went straight to ultra running.
Yeah, well, obviously, I didn't think it through, but
Clearly.
the the MDS marketing is really terrific, and
Yeah.
it made it seem like that was the pinnacle of human endurance. And I thought, well, why don't I like give myself a year to see if I can get in any kind of shape to finish this thing, and fully expecting that I'd probably crash and burn. But I started, I signed up. Well, I didn't sign up for the race. I identified that that was the challenge, and then I
Yep.
decided to go for a run. So I was living on the northern beaches, and I told my wife I'm just going to run to Palm Beach. So I was living in Manly. I was going to run to Palm Beach. It was about 25 Ks, just see whether the
Oh,
body
that
was
was your first
capable of it.
run. Yep.
Yep. So I got there and thought, as
Wow.
naive as I was in a pair of sand shoes, thought, oh yeah,
Mhm.
like I can do this. This is great. And then a couple of days later, I went for a 16K run, and I got like a bunch of tendonitis issues, like just overuse injuries straight away. And I was like, oh, maybe I need to take it, like slow it down a little bit
Yeah.
and see how it goes. So I I lived close to a dam, Manly Dam, which I'd never been to previously, but it's this amazing place that has all of these different bike tracks and running
Right, okay.
tracks, and so that became my where I'd go to train, and there was 8K loops, there's 12K loops. They do like a 23K race there, and
Okay.
I basically just learned how to run by doing different lengths, different loops around the dam, figuring out what my body could handle, and sort of building up load, doing that. And then about 6 weeks later, I signed up for the 50K in the UTA, which was my first race, um, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I thought it was such a beautiful course. And then yeah, just kind of kept building load until I headed over to the
How long
Sahara.
ago was this?
So this
Sorry.
was 2018. So
Yeah.
2019 was my MBS experience, and
Oh,
thoroughly.
lucky you got in just before COVID, so that
I
was lucky.
know, and it's actually that race is now like totally different to what it was
Oh,
back then.
really?
I think they've tried to move away from it being difficult and more like a scenic experience
Yeah, yeah.
for everyone, really. Like
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because we looked at
We watched a
a
YouTube video
YouTube
about it,
video,
and it
and
was a bit.
it looked like the village was kind of set, and they had a lot
yeah,
more facilities in the village than
Yes,
what we remembered seeing in the past.
yeah,
It looked a lot. Not, I wouldn't
easier.
say easier because running in the sand is never easy, but the experience seemed
yeah.
easier.
I think they're trying to cater to a much wider market, but
Yeah,
really the beauty of that race and the only reason why it appealed to me was because it was, supposed to be very difficult. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there was still 850 entrants when I did it.
Wow.
So
Jeez.
it's still a massive race.
Mm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I dare say they probably get a lot more now that the bivouac's in one spot and they kind of
Yeah.
just go
Yeah.
off from there. But
Mm.
yeah, no, it doesn't appeal to me at all now.
How did you go?
So I finished, I think I was like 124th or something, which is like
That's
way
awesome.
better than I ever thought I would finish. For me again,
Yeah.
it was just to get to the finish line. That was the goal. But I found that I got stronger as the week went on, and then
Hmm.
I actually got into a position where, so for the long stage, they send off the fastest 150 runners. They thereafter the rest of the pack. So I ended up being in that group, which was mind-boggling for me
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I still considered myself very much a poor runner, but it was a lot of fun because I was able to then basically catch up and yeah, and I did quite well in that long stage too. So the whole experience was a really good one for me. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Awesome. Awesome. And so then moving on, so that was 2019. We'll skip over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Unless you did something. Did you do some sort
Well,
of
I did, yeah. I
self
actually,
challenges?
yeah. So after I got back from MDS, I felt like it was a challenge, but it wasn't the challenge that I was looking for. Like I didn't feel like it had gotten me to the point where I felt, oh, I couldn't go on. And that's what I
Yeah.
was looking for. I was like, so many people will say I was looking for some sort of an edge, see how far
Yeah.
I could push my body, and
Mm.
I just didn't feel like MDS got me there. So I signed up for the Delirious West 200
Oh, yeah.
miler
Yep.
in Western Australia, which was way harder than MDS.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
Again,
wow.
oh my God. Like again,
That's
well,
interesting.
when you look at a stage race, like a stage race is always going to be easier than a
Yeah,
traditional A
fair.
to B ultra marathon. Like
Yeah.
the sleep component
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
itself, like that automatically makes it a way more manageable experience.
Yeah.
Delirious West was um, again, you're not able to sleep if you want to
Mm.
do it in a decent time. I did it with a friend of mine, and he split his calf muscle
Oh,
into
Oh,
about would have been about 150, 200 kilometers in. So and decided to keep going. So
oh God.
we just were slow, but again, that's an amazing course as
Yeah.
well. So it was an incredible experience. And then yeah, I've just I guess fallen in love with that feeling that you get in long ultra marathons. And I identified the 6633. That for me was like the ultimate, the hardest race I could possibly find. And I found that in 2020. But
Okay.
then
Yeah.
COVID hit. I wasn't able to. I'd signed up to it twice before I actually was able to get over there. So COVID, and then they cancelled the longest version of the race
Oh,
last year.
okay.
So then it was eventually this year that I could go
So,
and do that long
so
one.
we went onto the website, and the next time it's being run isn't till 2028. Why is
Yeah.
that?
So they don't run the long version every year because it's just such a logistical nightmare. It's so
So they
long.
run the shorter one every year.
They do, yeah. So
Oh,
they
right.
do.
Okay.
I think it's like a 200 miler or something.
I thought it was 120, I think.
No,
Oh,
there was two different ones. It was
Okay.
well, there was three different races, I think.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So they run the shorter ones, but they do, yeah,
I
I
love
know,
that we call them the shorter
sure,
ones.
the sprints. But they only do the long one, what, every 3 years or
every
something?
3 years, yeah.
Okay.
And for me, I knew I was only gonna have one crack at it. So,
Mhm.
you may as well get the longest, hardest version of it. So yeah, that was me this year.
So,
And
oh, sorry, go.
what did the family say when you said you were going to sign up and train for this race?
It's it's a point of friction. The longer and harder and further away these ultras are, the harder it is to have everyone feel good about it. So
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's really, my the time between MDS and this one, and
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a consideration for the family, not just
Yeah.
me. At the essence of it, it's like it's a selfish endeavor. I'm going out to try and achieve something that's for me. But
yeah.
I've got young kids and obviously a lot of responsibilities at home. So it's really about finding a happy medium and being able to satisfy that side, but making sure I don't neglect all of the other things that I have to do.
Yeah.
Because of course it's not just about the time that you're away for the race, it's the training. Like that would involve a lot of training, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to respect these events and you
Mm.
need to do the training because it's all good and well to sign up for something and get to the start line. But if you haven't done the work, then you're just a burden on everyone else. Like
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
DNF early, then that's you have to stick with the crew for the remainder of the race. And you're really just a pain in the ass. And then, if you don't put in the work, you're really just letting yourself down, but also the time commitment and the financial commitment
Yeah.
as well to even get there. So yeah, it's important to obviously respect it and do the work, but then you have to do it in a way that doesn't take away from everything else that
Mm.
you have as a responsibility in your life.
Mhm.
Yeah. So obviously it's on snow and you live in Adelaide. So how did you replicate that?
There was no way that I could ever prepare for the temperatures, and that was
No.
always a massive variable in this because I'd never been in sub-zero temperatures in my life. So I knew that there's nothing that I could do in regards to that. That was going to be something that I had to take a risk on. But what I did have control over is making sure that I was physically prepared, but also that I had the gear that could get me through it. So I just did a lot of research and I tried to buy the warmest gear that I could find, and make sure that I was prepared as much as possible heading into it. It was such a hot summer here. We were getting like 40-degree days all the
Bugger.
time, and
Yeah.
I'd go. A lot of my training I do at night time again, so that I wouldn't be
Mm.
a burden on the family and. Uh, you have bivvies that you use over there when you need to sleep, and I'd never used a bivvy before, so my idea was that I would set it up in the backyard the middle of the night and go and have an hour of sleep or whatever. And I thought that I'd become really good at that, but then what I had forgotten about or never even thought about was when you set it up on snow, you have to try and like not put your feet in the snow, and you have to try and do things really quickly. And I was just walking around leisurely pace in my socks, setting up the bivvy in the yard
Yeah.
and thinking that it was going to be the same thing. But
Yeah.
it really wasn't. So
Because of course, would you have to take off your gloves to set up the bivvy?
Oh God, yeah, like
Yeah,
the
and you don't want to do that for too long, do you?
no, no, like everything was absolutely as quickly as possible.
Mm,
You take too long and you risk, frostbite. And if you get
yep.
into the sleeping bag, like my sleeping bag was legitimately the warmest sleeping bag I could find. It was like handmade in Seattle, rated down to -60. But regardless, like if you get in with freezing feet or numb
Mm,
hands, like they're not going to warm up. It's just
no.
impossible. So everything has to be really quick and you have to avoid yeah, putting your feet down in the snow, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because you'd have to take your boots off before getting in the bivvy, otherwise you destroy the bivvy. But you don't want, yeah, that's really
Well,
complicated.
actually, the worst thing was so I had a plan that I would try and move 18 hours of each 24.
Yeah.
And when I got to the first aid station, I thought, yeah, I'll try and get a sleep here. So I set it up and I jumped in, but already frost was forming on the inside and on
Oh,
my
wow.
face. So I tried to shut it as quickly as I could, and I broke the zip. So I
Oh,
broke
yes.
I broke the
Oh, my
bivvy on
God.
night one. So
Right.
yeah, it was. I
So
mean,
what
like
did you do about that?
well, in the end, it was a bit of a catalyst for victory in this race because it just meant I didn't sleep. But
Yeah.
it was yeah, from then on, whenever I wanted to kind of sleep in the bivvy, I'd have to pull it over my head and
Oh,
try and
my.
hold it
Tuck it
closed
in, sort of
without the
thing.
zip. So it went straight in the bin as soon as the race finished.
Uh, and how did you? Because you towed a
Pook,
car. What?
pook. That's
Okay.
what you
Hulk,
call
yeah,
it?
yeah. So it's
Pook,
like a sled
pook.
on wheels,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you train for that?
I did I did a lot of pulling a tire.
Yeah.
So leading in, I would regularly have that as part of my workouts. I also did a 12-hour race where I pulled a tire for the duration as well.
Which race
And
was that? And were you the only one pulling a tire?
yeah, so I did there was two races leading in the last month and a half. The one was 100 miler on a racetrack, like on a 400
Oh,
meter
yeah.
racetrack.
Yeah.
And then the other one was a yeah, 12-hour race, max distance on like a 3K circuit, and I just
Yeah.
pulled
Yeah.
a tire for the 12 hours. So I was slower than everyone else, but
No kidding.
yeah, but it was good. I
But
mean,
you
like
gave the other competitors a bit of something to think about other than their own pain.
Yeah, thank God I'm
well,
not the one. Thank God I'm not that guy dragging the tire. Did you
Tire
see
around.
that?
it
That's
was funny because it takes like it really batters your ego when everyone passes you, even though you know that it's because you're pulling a tire. So every 2 hours or so, I'd do a lap without the tire,
To
and it
show
felt
them.
like I was the fastest guy on the planet, and I'd just be speeding past people, and it was like this is just a reminder that I can actually run. It's just that I'm pulling this tire, so I
That's
couldn't help
funny.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, so what surprised you the most during the race, either about the environment you're in, your body, or your mindset?
I think what surprised me the most was my ability to not sleep. I love sleeping and I generally sleep quite well in normal life. But over the 7 days and 22 hours that it took to finish this race, I slept like 11 hours max, which I wouldn't have thought was possible leading in. Like I could never have had that strategy because I would never have thought that it would be possible. But
Yeah.
when you're in the thick of it, and I guess the conditions made it impossible for me to sleep any kind of decent amount of time. So
So
I
you
would
couldn't
just
sleep at the aid stations, like in the places that they
no.
had. They
It's a
wouldn't let you.
fully no, yeah. So it's a fully self-sufficient race.
Oh, so
So
you can't use the aid stations? What are?
yeah, so the way that it works is if you go through a community and they offer up something, you're allowed to
Uh,
accept. So at some of the aid stations, they'd have the gymnasium of the local school available
yeah,
to
yeah,
sleep in. But otherwise, it was like a tent in a that they had set up that you could go in and eat some food. But then if you wanted to sleep there, you had to sleep outside in the snow. So.
yeah.
There was a couple of opportunities to sleep without the bivvy, and but the most I could ever sleep was 2 hours at a time. And I think it was just because I was in a race and I always felt, even though it was a long race, I still knew that, you know, I was in a race and I was competitive and really I wasn't the fastest. So the only way that I could stay towards the front was to leave the aid stations quicker than everyone else.
Yeah.
And how do you rest? I'm not talking about sleep, but actually taking a breather, like in those
Yeah,
cold
because you'd get too
temperatures.
cold.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
like
can't. Yeah, it's just not possible. I've thought about other long ultras that I've done, and when you're really sore and tired, you could just take 10 minutes. Like
Yeah,
you
that's
could
right.
stop running.
yeah,
You could just take 10 minutes to like
yeah,
just relax and get yourself together. But it's just not possible there because if you stop, you just get cold, and then it takes ages to get warm again. So no opportunity. And I guess that's why it's a difficult race because it's just unrelenting because of the conditions.
yeah.
It just doesn't allow for any kind of rest at all.
Do you actually do any running in that kind of race?
Yeah, so I would still run the downhills, always do that, and some of the flats. Would never run the uphills.
Got you.
The exception to that is in the last stage with about 50 kilometers to go, I caught up to the guys that were winning the race, and
Oh,
they
Oh,
okay.
actually
okay.
had decided to take a sleep break.
Ah.
So
So
once I
you snooze, you lose is a good
Exactly,
saying.
yeah. So I got in front of them, and then I wanted to put as much distance between me and them as possible. So I
Yeah.
essentially ran the last
Wow.
46 kilometers, I would say. But 46 kilometers felt like nothing, considering
Yes.
I'd already
How far
gone
you've been. So when you're
550.
running downhill with a pulk behind you, you're not scared that it's going to catch up and
Yeah,
overtake you?
like what sort of
No,
control do you
because
have?
yeah, you've got so there's like PVC pipe, like tubing between the your belt
Ah,
and the
okay.
pulk,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
it remains behind you. It depends on
Yeah.
how you want to do it. So, they don't really have rules on how what the pulk needs to look. Obviously, it couldn't have an engine, but other than that, it doesn't, people have different styles. But
Yeah.
being that I'm in Australia and these pulks are like specifically made for races like this. I hired one from
Yeah.
the organizers, so it was essentially like I'd never used
Yeah.
it before I used it for the first time. So it was but it was fine.
Yeah.
Probably best case scenario, really, it was easier than pulling a tire. So it was all good.
So did you get there? How did you get used to using the Polk? Like, did you get there early and practice, or did you wait till the race started and then go, right now, how do I do this?
No, so
Like how?
they give you the pole. So you get to Whitehorse about 5 days before the race starts.
Yeah.
And then you get the polk maybe on day two or day three, and then they take you out for like a 10K run with the polk to get used to it. And then
Okay.
and they want to see that you can set up a
Yeah.
bivvy and that you can cook snow turn it into water and in case you're kind of get lost or something like that. But a little bit scary. I got back and one of the wheels fell off my Polk. And I was
Oh,
like, oh my
Christ.
God, like I've just been out there for 10Ks. Like, what if this happens 100Ks in? He's like, oh,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. They just like fixed it and said, oh, you'll be fine. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
a little bit worried about that. But yeah, it proved to be pretty good in the end.
Hmm.
So when it comes to food, now that would be tricky because some foods are completely inedible in the cold. How did you manage that?
Yeah, so also there's like immigration considerations, like
Of course,
getting
yeah.
through security. Like, so you're not able to actually bring any of your own food because you're at risk of them taking it away when you get to Canada. So in Whitehorse, you essentially just have to buy what you're going to need for the race. I had a rough idea of what I thought a good plan would be. But in the end, I just bought enough dehydrated meals that I could have one at
Yeah.
each aid station, and then the rest was essentially lollies and chocolate, just
Yeah.
chocolate bars, and really, um, just as many calories as I could find. Luckily in the US and Canada, like their chocolate bars are just obscene. So,
Yes.
you know, they're just bursting with calories. So it's not that
Yeah.
difficult. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was strange though, because towards the end, I had lost a lot of weight and I just felt like I was running out of food. And it's not a feeling that I've had before. And I actually felt like I was getting a little bit desperate. So
Okay.
had the race been longer, I think I would have been in some real trouble. But yeah, I was able to get to the end. Yeah, so essentially, you know, just a calorie bomb of a dehydrated meal at each of the aids, and then just lollies
Yeah.
and chocolate throughout.
So how often were the aid stations like, and so you didn't prepare meals outside of those aid stations? You waited until you got there.
Yeah, I thought that I'd be able to, but it was just too difficult in the between them
Mm.
to well, really, even though, so the gas that you have for the camping cookers, like freezers, it's really hard to get it going. You've got to keep it inside, like on your body, to warm it up enough that you'd be able to use it. But then even firing it up when the temperatures are, you know, minus 30 or below, it just doesn't do a very good job out there.
No.
So you know, you could spend an hour trying to cook you know, a boiled water to be able to have one of
Mm.
the dehydrated meals, which just would be like a waste of time, and it would put you at risk, in all honesty,
Yeah.
in
Too
terms
long
of
to sit around. Yeah.
frostbite and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I just tried to make do until I got to an aid station, and then the tents were heated, so it just made
Wow.
everything so much easier to prepare those meals.
And how often were they like situated?
Yeah. They generally would be between 80 and 100 kilometers apart.
So
So
nothing really.
yeah,
Jeez.
it was like just time is different when you're doing those
Yeah.
races. So
Yeah.
you just you bite off chunks of, like, you know,
Yeah.
20 hours here, 24 hours, and it just becomes normal as you
Yeah.
get into it. Yeah, obscene in normal life, but when you're in the
Yeah.
middle of it, it
Mm.
just doesn't seem like that much.
And,
And
and
yes, sir.
sorry, and were there many villages that you passed through, like, or were you really just in the middle of nowhere for a long period of time?
Yeah, the so the way that it works is you have all these indigenous hamlets up the Arctic coast, and they have an ice road between all of them. So you're on the ice road for a lot of the time, and then
Okay.
they would generally have an aid station at each of the hamlets.
Uh-huh.
So there was a couple, but the vast majority of the time you're out there by yourself,
Mm.
and you really don't see people until you get closer to the civilization. But yeah, that they exist, and you know, they have essentially have one road that goes up through these hamlets, and they've got a big ice gate where the race starts, is a place called Eagle Plains, and it's a big ice gate. And when the weather is terrible, the ice gate remains closed, and none of these hamlets can get any of the food and stuff that they need. And
Wow.
then, you know, it opens up and the trucks can get through. And yeah, it reminds me a lot. The indigenous hamlets remind me a lot of you know, the same situation up north in Australia. And the people are quite similar as well.
Yeah.
In my experience. But just an incredible place to go. And if it had not been for a race like this, I would never go.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, this is a gift that you really get from these long ultra races.
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly would have to be very hardy
Yeah.
people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well,
Did
in the
yeah.
last one, where the temperatures were like minus 40, and
Yeah.
there was kids just playing in the playground.
Oh my God, isn't that funny?
It's
That's hilarious.
incredible. Yeah, yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's what you're used to, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you like listen to headphones or anything like that, or just your own
Yeah.
thoughts?
How did you deal with the loneliness of
Yeah.
being, you know,
Yeah.
so secluded?
The rules are that so for the first maybe 300 kilometers, there is the potential of these big trucks on the roads, so they don't want you listening to anything.
Oh,
Plus,
golly.
in those temperatures,
Yeah.
batteries don't work like they do
No.
normally. So they either just like drain really quickly or,
Yeah.
you know, all electronics are just like very unreliable in those temperatures. So like even my head torches, I had three head torches and all three were rubbish the entire time. They would just like
Mm.
drain immediately or sporadically work. It was a
Oh
nightmare.
God.
So there was no opportunity to listen to anything for maybe half the race. And the second half, I'd been talking to myself so much and hallucinating so much that I was like, oh, you know, I should just give this a crack.
Yeah.
And I could get my I've got just the Apple AirBuds or whatever they're called, and I
Yeah.
could get them to work a little bit, like the noise, like it didn't sound normal, but it was enough to try and, you know, keep me sane.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So it's obviously not a marked course. So how do you know where to go?
It's it's uh it's not marked, but it's either on ice roads or really well-defined trail, and there's only one trail. So
Okay.
it would be there was only one time I think that I felt like I might have been lost, but it was lost in a way that I knew that I was still in the general vicinity of where the
Yeah.
trail was. And it turned out that I wasn't lost. It was just that there'd been a lot of snow and the trail was a little bit less defined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So which is great because I've got a terrible sense of direction. I know you did the Barkley,
Yeah.
and I think I would really struggle with that. I would definitely get lost. But yeah, luckily this one it was pretty clear which way the
Yeah.
direction was.
Mhm.
Did you have any low moments during the race? I mean, I'm assuming a race of that length, you probably had multiple. And if so, how did you get through them?
Yeah, so I definitely had low moments, but I knew that I was uh, gonna finish it. Like
Yeah.
I'd come that far, and regardless of how much pain I was in or you know how lonely I was, I always knew that I was going to work through all of
Yeah.
the you know the sad moments and the painful moments. So they definitely existed, and I think that really what always pulled me out of it was just remembering how lucky I was to have the opportunity to do something that was epic, like something that was so unusual in everyday life. So from the beginning to the end, I just felt like I was fortunate. And though it was painful and it was difficult, I was still in a position that I could work through that and then complete something that I'll always look back on as being like a very positive experience. So yeah, low moments, but you're always going to have low moments when you do races like this.
That's right. I mean, it's part of it and the pain and the discomfort. Like without that, where's the challenge anyway? So
Well, and you're 100% right. If it didn't have that, then I
yeah,
wouldn't be interested. So yeah,
yeah,
it's an inevitable part. And the thing is that, and as you guys would know as well, the best learnings come from those low moments.
absolutely.
The
Yeah.
clarity is in those moments. So a big part of why I go back to do these ultra marathons is because you get into a mindset that it's impossible to get into without doing these difficult things.
Yeah.
Mm.
And there's something really beautiful about that. So the low moments, yeah, they're difficult, but that's where the greatest growth is, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did like when you were racing, did you know where you were in the race? Did you know that, you were in second place or you knew that where the guys were in front of you? Like, did you know where you were situated?
Yes, there was only like 14 people on the start line. And at
Were
every
there
age.
any women, just out of interest? Were there any women?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, there was the actually the so five people finished, and there was only one lady that finished, and she finished the following day after I
Yeah.
had. But she's incredible. A Brazilian woman that lives in the US, and she just bounces from like ridiculously long ultra marathon to the next. So the following month, she did that Arizona 300-mile race. So she's gone from the Arctic to Arizona in the space of a month. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
just yeah, you know,
Yeah.
she enjoys those down moments, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, I just wanted to find that out. But yeah, go on, go
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Where
So
you,
we would I would at every single aid station, I was there at the same time as the two guys that were in the kind of same group. The guys that ended up finishing second and third.
Mhm.
They were generally quicker than I was, but I would always get in after them but leave before them. So they'd be winning coming into the aid
See,
station, and then I'd be
that's
winning
so
coming
important.
out for like the first
Yeah.
3 hours, and then they'd overtake me, and then we'd repeat that. So pretty much every single aid station that was the case. So yeah, I did know where people were. I guess the only exception to that was in that last stage, they left about 2 hours before me. So I didn't know whether they had opened up that gap or whether
Yeah.
I had closed it.
Yeah.
And so that would be the only time. But again, we were heading to the finish line. So yeah, that was normal.
And then how did you feel like when you saw with in their bivvies on the side of the road, I'm
Were they
assuming?
still asleep? And did you sneak past, like
Like
turn off your heat torch and all that
I
sort of
couldn't
stuff?
believe it actually. So it was interesting because as we were getting closer to, so I had my phone in my sleeping bag, and I would forget about it. But when you'd come close to the bigger hamlets, there'd start to be some reception that would seep in, and then you'd get some notifications. And as we like about 50 k's from the finish line, I saw something came through on my watch, some sort of notification. I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to see where the other two are, because I'd been kind of like falling in and out of consciousness as I was running, and I
Oh,
was worried that I was going to pass out. So I'd been going really fast just to try and like get to the
yeah,
finish
yeah.
line. So I knew I'd had like 3 hours of above my average speed. So I thought maybe I've closed the gap a little bit. So I actually took my phone out and tried to find where they were on the tracking. And they were only like 1.2 miles ahead of me. And I
Oh,
was like, oh, that's weird. And then it felt like maybe 20 minutes or something. I saw the lights of their polk up ahead. And as I got closer, like it never computed that like they might be sleeping. I couldn't figure out why you would sleep when you
that
were
close. Yeah.
you were maybe 10 hours from the finish line. I was like,
Yeah.
it just didn't make sense
That
to me.
close.
So I thought that one of them must have hurt themselves or something,
Hmm.
and the other one had just kind of waited around. So when I got up close to them, I saw that they were sleeping, but I called out to make sure that they were
Oh,
okay, and I didn't get anything back.
okay.
So I just thought, oh man, they're sleeping. And then I thought, yeah, I better go win this thing now. So I got going. But yeah, it's I spoke to them afterwards, and one of the guys had said that he heard me, but for them, they were just exhausted. They couldn't move, so
Yeah.
they had to sleep, and they had no other choice. So yeah.
Fair enough. When you towed the start line, were you in your head thinking that you wanted to win it, or were you
No,
just
no.
whatever will be, will be?
For me, this has been the pinnacle of like, what I'd set out to achieve. Like I was sure that I was going to find, the absolute edge of what I was capable of in this race, and finishing it. This is a really hard race to finish. A lot of years, they get one or two finishes. Sometimes they don't get anyone finishing it. So
Okay.
it was 100% about finishing it for me. And then, but naturally, I'm a competitive person. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
when it got down to the last couple of aid stations, I was still hovering around that, that the top of the field there, and then the moment there was a like a chance of winning it, yeah, I was all for that.
Good for you. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So did you find what you were looking for?
Um, Well, yeah. So for me now, I think that the edge probably isn't an edge. Like it's probably just a willingness to go further than like physically than probably what's acceptable. Like it sounds really bleak, but I think that if I wanted to push for something, it would be my body that would give out before my brain. So I think that like
Mhm.
I could probably like I could, and my wife knows this about me. She probably could have told me this before I even did the races, but
Saved you all
probably I
that time
could.
and effort. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably not an edge. It's probably just a willingness to push beyond what my body is capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I had an ankle injury like in this race, 150 kilometers in, like my ankle
Oh,
just
God.
blew up,
Oh,
um
right.
but I knew that if I pulled out a day or two later, it would calm down, and I would have
Mm.
pulled out. And I knew that it was unlikely that I would cause any lasting damage if I kept going. So,
Yeah.
you have all of these little bits of adversity thrown at you. But if you remain calm in the, with that uncomfortable feeling, and you just steadily work your way out of it, it's very possible. So, I just kept telling myself that, and again, like I was determined to not leave the Arctic without finishing. So,
Mm.
So this kind of race, is really not just a test of your fitness, but of your problem-solving skills and your mental abilities to be flexible, mentally flexible as well.
yeah, absolutely. I would say that I always think that the body and the mind are very separate things, and like to
Mm.
achieve something that's very difficult, you have to get it to a point where both are somewhat equivalent.
Yeah,
Sometimes, the body is very willing, but the body isn't capable, and that will inevitably result in, a bad outcome. But the same is true the other way. If you have a very capable body, but you don't have the will to do something, it, the same thing will happen. So for me, it's about like getting the two aligned, and if the two are aligned, then you can achieve great things. But this race is very like it is a mental challenge.
Mhm.
yeah,
The You're not running. This isn't like the ability to run a sub 3 hour marathon. This is not, then you're not looking for elite runners. You're looking for people that can be in pain for a very long period of
yeah.
time and are fit enough to get to the finish line. So, that's my sweet spot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it, that I find it infinitely interesting because I tend to choose races that where you suffer as well. That why are some of us drawn to that kind of thing, whereas other people would find that abhorrent?
Yeah.
I just find it interesting about the human condition,
Yeah, and again, I think for me, it's the clarity you get when you're in that pain. Because, I always feel somewhat like a dumber version of myself whilst I'm in it. But in everyday life, we have all of these self-defenses that we tell ourselves, like, oh, it's okay not to do this because I've done this and I've done that and all the rest. And like regardless, even in your relationships and everything, like you naturally are looking to defend yourself from the truth. But when you're out there, you don't have the energy for any of that. So, all of these things, these problems that you might have been wrestling with for a long time, it just becomes so clear, and it's just incredible. I feel like you can learn so much about yourself in what
Mm.
is relatively a short period of time by just putting yourself in that situation. And I know that's why I go back, because I've not been able to find a comparable situation where I can grow to the same extent. So
Yeah,
there's, as I said before, like there's just some great beauty in just the clarity that you experience in times of great difficulty, and generally that's what ultra marathons are.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, that's
So
great.
what's next for you?
I promised my wife nothing, so that
Yeah,
that was my
rightio. She
retirement
didn't
race.
believe it either.
I think maybe if I'm to do more ultras, it'll be close to home stuff. So
Yeah.
like the Sonder Monster is something that I've really liked the look
Yeah,
of
yeah,
on the Larapinta track in up north.
yeah,
Um, or something that like like an FKT or something. Maybe not a defined race. There's the group that do the Delirious West have got a couple of other races. I like the way that they run their races, so maybe something
yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah,
Sean's great.
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
actually heading over to Adelaide in July to do one of their races called the Ultra Adelaide.
yeah. I'm doing
Oh,
the
cool. Yeah,
miler.
yeah. I
Yeah,
did that
yeah,
last.
Yeah,
I've done the 100 and the 50.
yeah. We've
Um,
done the 100 and the 50,
yeah,
oh
so
yeah.
stepping it up to the miler this time.
This is the
Yeah,
first year they're doing that, right?
yeah,
yeah.
yep, yep, yep.
I wonder
So
where
yeah,
where else they're going to go.
I
What they're
think it
going to
I don't
tackle.
starts.
know. I
I
haven't
think
actually looked at the map
yeah, we haven't looked at it properly, but I think it just
at
starts
all.
60 miles further down,
Okay.
But it
south
still
sort of thing.
finishes with that really nice 19-kilometre stretch on concrete. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
When I did the 100, I knew that 19 Ks was there. But for whatever reason, I decided to put on a pair of socks that I thought were mine, but they weren't, and they were too small, and
Oh,
my
no.
feet. So that 19 Ks actually was like the worst part of the entire race for me. But it is easy. You feel like you can kind of just roll
Oh,
home.
no, I find that the
Um,
worst part.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
just
Flat and concrete? No,
No,
no.
you put on your big fat road running shoes and then
Yes,
just
see, and that was the thing.
we
We
did.
actually we had our shoes in our drop bag at that final aid or that aid station
yeah.
that starts.
But we were like,
Right.
nah, we'll
We
be
got to
right.
it and we were like, oh, I can't be bothered. Well, I'm sure we'll be fine. So we ignored that and left our shoes in the drop bag and carried on with our trail shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
5Ks later, I'm like, my feet.
I think that's actually like a well-known thing for that race because I
Mm.
did the same when I first did it, but then it became like out on the track for the 50. People were talking about how they'd like put their super shoes in that drop bag ready to go. So
Well,
um,
I think I'll be doing that for the
yes.
miler. I'll be bouncing along down that concrete path.
yeah, there's some
Yeah.
great trails in Adelaide actually.
I love the
Yeah,
Adelaide Hills.
we love running
I
through there.
love Adelaide for running. It is brilliant. And Sean always puts on a great event, like
It
such a,
does.
I like the grassroots feelings of
Yeah.
races. I'm not really into UTA and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
More sort of,
Mm.
grassroots races, which I
I think
reckon
he's
Sean's
doing the
nailed.
the first Cape to Cape
Yes,
in
I was
WA.
thinking of doing that, but we'll be in the UK or just getting back from the UK.
I'd
So
say I'll do that at some point. I think that'll be an
I want to do
unbelievable
that one.
course.
Yeah,
The Bibbulmun in WA
yeah.
it's amazing. Lots of snakes, but it's amazing.
And that's it. I mean, I think, it is good to do some of the ones closer to home as well. But there is a special draw to doing things overseas, I reckon. Like, I
Yeah,
totally get it.
well, the thing is as well that I found with both MDS and the 6633 is, when you're over there, you're there for one reason, like to get to the finish line. You don't have any other responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's a really unique feeling, and I actually don't know if I could get to the end of like a really, really long one, if all my family were there and I felt
Mm.
like, I was being torn in different directions. It's just,
Mm.
again, it's like, it's such a selfish thing. Like, it's
Yeah.
really just about you getting to the finish line. Nothing else matters. And it's such an abnormal way of thinking
Yeah.
because in life, you just don't ever get that. So it's
Which is
That's right.
why it's important to do sometimes,
That's
I
right.
think,
And sometimes if you've got your family around, especially if they're your crew, the last thing you need when you come into an aid station, you're just feeling like the world's on your shoulders and you get sympathy.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of having family. They give you sympathy. What you need is someone to say, get off your ass and get out and get it done.
Yeah.
well, I don't
But
think
your
I've
family
ever
aren't
had
going to.
crew, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what that'd
Those
feel
races.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
Ron's
I
my
totally get
crew, but
Yeah.
he doesn't give me sympathy.
Just
Thank
tells you to
God.
get back out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I don't want sympathy. Yeah.
Nah,
All right. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on your win. Did you win anything good or, nothing?
Well,
What?
not
Just a warm,
money,
fuzzy
but I
feeling?
mean, like you would never expect to win money doing these races, but they actually have it's you get a medal, and the medal has three components. So the shorter race, the middle one and the bigger one. So the idea is
Ah,
that if you do the shorter one, you win the shorter medal, and then you try and get to the big one.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
But having finished the big one, I get all three, and then you also
Cool.
get the winners get these. It's a really nice trophy actually. It's like a sacred structure for the indigenous community
Oh,
that
nice.
they make out of ice. Obviously, the trophy isn't made out of ice, but it's a replica.
Because
And
they wouldn't last very long.
it's about as pretty a trophy as you can get. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's all you really want, like, because really anything else is transitory.
yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic result. And well done on representing Australia, especially, no snow and everything. And you got out there and won it. So that's brilliant. Yeah, well done. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us.
No
Thank you.
worries. Best of luck on your next ultra in Scotland.
Thank you. All
All right.
righty. Bye.